Imagine you had a time machine. You'd be able to travel back to one of the greatest years in recorded history. 2000. The future. But in the past, once there, you'd of course want to travel to the small town of Jennings, Louisiana, where you could then meet a wide-eyed 13-year-old boy named Jim. He'd be wearing huge jeans, drinking dangerous amounts of Mountain Dew, and he'd practically be glued to his PlayStation. He'd also be happy to talk your ear off about some of his developing interests, those being action films, sci-fi, cyberpunk, anime, industrial rock music, and a big one, survival horror games. Now, stop imagining, because that boy was me, and those jeans were mine. And it was in February of 2000 that one of my all-time favorite games was released, and that is Fear Effect, a game that was seemingly made just for me, or at least the 13-year-old version of me. So let's take a closer look and see what it was exactly that made this game such a masterpiece at the time, and if it still holds up today.
One sphere takes over, the lines of reality blur, making it impossible to tell whether you're playing or being played.
Before going on though, I think a little bit of a history lesson is in order. Fear Effect was published by Eidos, but it was developed by a rather obscure studio called Kronos Digital Entertainment. In their 10 years of developing games, they only completed 6. 2 of them being Fear Effect and its sequel, 3 fighting games that were all pretty mediocre, though I do have some fond memories with Cardinal Sin and a game that I think was in many ways the precursor to Fear Effect, a 1997 PC exclusive called Meat Puppet. In this isometric action-adventure, you take control of the sexy and sassy Lotus, the titular meat puppet of the game. Meat puppets being prostitutes that have been repurposed into assassins, and are forced to carry out the orders of a mysterious benefactor, or face immediate execution. Aesthetically, this game leans heavily into dystopian cyberpunk, and is drenched in a thick coating of 90s edginess. Lots of violence, sexual innuendo, harsh language, and of course, plenty of tood, both from Lotus and her AI helper who doubles as some sort of weird BDSM program. In fact, Lotus is in kind of a gimp suit too. The whole thing has kind of an Aeon Flux vibe to it.
So it's business as usual until I kill the next guy. Then I can open any door I want, break anything I want, or blow up anything I want.
You'll get your fill of violence.
At the time, reviews of Meat Puppet were very mixed, saying that the story and characters were very compelling, but that the gameplay left something to be desired. Of course, you can now play it on Steam and judge for yourself, but the point is, the devs at Kronos obviously had a vision in mind of a dark, sexy, and violent action puzzler set against a cyberpunk backdrop. Fast forward to 2000 and we finally get to Fear Effect, the ultimate realization of everything Kronos was going for with Meat Puppet, only much better than that. It's set in the mid-21st century and it starts you off in Hong Kong, introducing you to the 3 main playable characters. Hana, a former prostitute turned assassin and mercenary, Glass, a grizzled war vet and friend of Hana's, and Deke, a pudgy, psychopathic Australian guy. It's kind of all we get on Deke. Initially, the 3 of them have a plan to kidnap the daughter of a powerful triad leader and hold her for ransom, but it all goes sideways, as these things so often do, and what results is a terrifying, blood-soaked adventure that literally takes them to the depths of hell, or at least one of the Chinese hells. Maybe the hell of being really irritated by puzzles.
Hell of being what?
Chinese have a lot of help.
So yeah, the setting, the tone, the characters, it's everything Meat Puppet was, and then some, and it especially hangs on to that edginess. There's plenty of graphic violence, lots of sexual content, primarily from Hana, and more of that naughty language, or at least the word shit comes up over and over again. They really like saying shit.
We'll need to warn Deke. There's a shitstorm coming.
Shit! Shit on
Oh, shit.
Say shit on shit! Shit!
Shit! King shit and shit!
Oh, shit.
Shit!
Shit in the
Shitty shit! Shitty!
shit!
Oh, damn it.
Potty mouths aside though, the story in Fear Effect is actually very engaging and takes more than a few surprising twists and turns throughout, including multiple endings depending on the difficulty you complete the game on, and your own preference for who should live and who should die. For 13-year-old Jim, this was all totally badass, and it really appealed to my growing interest in things like cyberpunk, horror, and in particular survival horror, which is exactly what this game turns into. It might not necessarily look like a Resident Evil game, but the influence can definitely be felt when you're playing. In particular, the tank controls and fixed camera angles will remind you of Capcom's earlier survival horror outings, though it's clear that Chronos was at least trying to do something different with Fear Effect. Your health indicator, for example, is referred to as your fear gauge. It's essentially a heart monitor that goes from green to red and is supposed to indicate how afraid your character is, but really it operates the same as any other health gauge, changing color as you take damage. You don't have access to any health restoring items though, instead having your health replenished after certain criteria are met, completing a puzzle for example, or activating a cutscene. Perhaps the most difficult thing to get used to would be the combat. It's kind of odd really. When you have your weapons drawn, you can't actually aim them, but instead, your character will aim automatically when enemies are in sight, so you have to be patient. Firing off your guns before your enemies are in your crosshairs can alert them to your presence, giving them a chance to take some shots at you. It's also really irritating when enemies move in and out of your line of fire, sometimes by leaving the screen entirely as your character is in a constant loop of gaining and losing their aim. It's imperfect to be sure, but nothing game-breaking. In fact, after a while, it kind of becomes second nature, just knowing where to position yourself and how to be patient to get your shots on target. A pretty cool feature though is the ability to fire at multiple targets at once when you're dual-wielding pistols or Uzis, and if you're sneaky enough, you can actually perform some stealth kills too, but only on human enemies. Eventually, when you're facing off with demons and possessed corpses, stealth is completely out the window and you'll be relying exclusively on firepower. And that goes double for the boss encounters. Regardless if it's an attack helicopter or the King of Hell himself, there's no problem a few bullets can't fix. Aside from the combat, the other thing you'll be spending most of your time doing in Fear Effect is solving puzzles. And this is another thing that might give you a bit of trouble, as these things can be pretty cryptic upon your first playthrough. The solutions for most of the puzzles can be found in context clues hidden somewhere in the area, but they require you to pay a lot of attention to detail. They're very easy to miss, and for some of these puzzles, you've only got one shot at them. Get them wrong and it's game over. Although failing these puzzles or failing to navigate certain obstacles properly will result in unique death animations. So if you're anything like me, you'll probably intentionally take a few L's just to see our heroes bite the dust in various creative ways.
I hope you die.
So while the gameplay in Fear Effect comes with its fair share of irritating sections, and the controls do take some getting used to, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with tank controls, this is a supremely enjoyable game once you get your bearings. But I can't deny that the story, characters, and the visual presentation are what stand out most. At the time, there weren't really any other games that looked like Fear Effect. The characters themselves were textured in such a way that it resembled cel shading, though technically it really isn't. Cel-shaded graphics became very prevalent in the years to come, but at the time, this was something of a novelty, and the environments in Fear Effect really stood out for their high level of detail. That's because instead of using pre-rendered images as backgrounds, everything you see is actually a full-motion video clip being played on a loop. It's a little wonky here and there when the background clip ends and then restarts, which can be very noticeable at times, but the increased level of detail looks really cool, and some of these backgrounds are very dense. It's actually the reason that Fear Effect came on 4 discs, even though the game itself is fairly short, but the end result is a game that is very visually striking and was able to provide a more cinematic experience than other action games from the late 90s. When I was playing Fear Effect, it felt like I was playing a sci-fi horror anime come to life, which was exactly what I wanted at the time. So this was a perfect game for me when I was 13, but you can't stay 13 forever though. So the question is this game still perfect for me? The short answer is yes, even though it's much easier for me to admit to its flaws now. The controls leave a lot to be desired, the dialogue can be a bit corny, the quote-unquote edginess can be a bit on the nose sometimes, and the visuals have lost some of their luster over the years. But despite all of that, I still love this game. The story, the characters, and the over-the-top violence and sexual content, the sound design, and again the aesthetics are what really make this game such a joy for me to play. The gameplay itself is kind of just there to fill in the cracks, to the point now where I can just breeze through this game in a few hours just to get a little nostalgia rush and enjoy the story all over again, which I do at least once a year, kind of like watching Groundhog Day. This is one game that I recommend everyone play at least once. You might end up hating it and playing it no more than 30 minutes or so, or you might love it just as much as I do. There's only one way to know for sure. It's Fear Effect, and it's awesome.
Awesome!
Goodbye, my friend. Hannah, delay Yim La Wang until I am gone. Hurry!